Hello and welcome to Healthcare IT Today, where we explore the latest healthcare technology trends and discover valuable insights in health IT. I'm Colin Hung, and joining me today is Niko Skievaski, co-founder and president at Redox. Niko, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Colin. So excited to be here with you.
Yeah, and Niko, today we're going to be talking about a topic that is a little bit different than what we normally talk about. Like normally when you and I get together, we're talking about interoperability and the state of health IT. But today I'm excited to talk to you about corporate culture.
Yeah. Something that I think, at least for me, has been top of mind over the past couple of years. But I know for a lot of people, as work has really changed in the pandemic, has become really top of mind as people are transitioning how they work, and if people are in person, and all of the other sort of stresses of our lives that the pandemic has brought on, and how that sort of creeps its way into the workplace. And so, yeah, I'm pumped to talk about this topic.
So maybe before we dive into some of the things you just mentioned, Niko, how would you define corporate culture? Can you give us sort of what you're feeling about when someone says that word, what do you think about?
Yeah, I think of it kind of as behavior at scale. And the at scale part is important there, because it's not just behavior of people with each other. It's what happens across your organization. The way Luke, my co-founder, put it is he says, culture is what happens when you're not around. And so much of it is influenced by leadership and kind of the way people behave with each other. But it's really like the next ripple after that wave of behavior. It's like, how do people treat each other on a day-to-day basis? How do they show up with customers within the industry? All of that is kind of encompassed in culture. And the way that we think about it at Redox is that our mission is really like the why we do what we do. Our strategy is the what, like what are we going to do to accomplish the mission? And then our culture is the how. Like, how do we put it all together to, what do we do with our hands in order to actually like move that mission forward? And so that's that's how we think about culture. It's sort of one of the three pillars of organizing our company.
I love it. And you've brought up some of the things, you touched on a couple of things that you're doing at Redox, and I want to dive more into that because you and I spoke at the last couple of conferences where we saw each other. You told me that basically you're putting a lot more focus on the culture side of Redox. Can you share with us sort of the reasons why you're doing that? You're putting such a focus, and then second, can you share some examples of some of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, for sure. Well, a few things happened in our history that that has made me focus on this. So first off, when we started Redox, we sat down. There was probably 6 of us at the time, our first 3 employees and our 3 founders, and we basically did a brainstorm, like, what is the type of company that we want to build and we want to work at? And we wrote down sticky notes, and then we went around sharing them, and we grouped them, and the groups of those sticky notes turned into our values. And those were the values that we tried to hold ourselves accountable to and aspired towards, and really sort of built the culture upon. But that was, at the time, 6 guys who used to work at Epic, who sort of were aspirational about the culture. And as we started to grow, we evolved those values to fit more with who we were. And the first many years of Redox was, I think about like the startup journey for a lot of companies. We had a pretty spectacular sort of fairy tale startup journey, in that, like, we found product market fit, we grew quickly, we're tripling the company every year, and everything was looking great. We were accomplishing our vision, and then when 2020 hit, the pandemic, we probably had 300 active projects with health systems, and 250 of them got paused or canceled or delayed in Q2 of 2020. And we were like, oh no, we don't think we're going to hit our goals this year. And so we had to look at our spending and figure out how to get it under control to live another day. And that was, I think, one of the first big, I would say, cracks in our cultural container at Redox, because what we ended up having to do in June of 2020 was lay off 25% of the company. So 44 people at the time. And by far the hardest thing that I've ever had to be a part of as a leader within an organization. And so yeah, we had to lay off those people. But what happened was everyone who was left, including myself, were like, why was it them and not me? Like, why did I make that list? Because we literally had to choose this person or that person. Like, that's what it comes down to, and making those decisions. I think we handled that process well, but it sort of left this feeling within the organization of like, could this happen again? Am I safe here? Should I start looking for another job to have, a backup or a pipeline in place? And that was a trauma within the organization that we had to figure out how to deal with. And, years later, the people who were here at that time are still dealing with it. They're still thinking about the friends that they worked with that, are no longer with us. Luckily, things turned around for Redox. We were able to raise more money. We were able to hit our goals. We were able to, we hired another 100 people since then, including some of the people that we had to lay off. We were able to hire many of them back, which was awesome that, they would even give us the opportunity to do that. But now we're up to about 220 people in the company. We passed Dunbar's number, which is, the sort of number of people human beings can be acquaintances with. And really what that means, I think, from a cultural perspective, is that you can't depend as much on relationships to govern how we behave with each other. You have to depend a little more on processes, because you're not going to have a tight relationship with every single person at the company. And it's about that 150 mark where that happens. And so yeah, that's the kind of couple things that has forced my focus on culture now. The trauma that we had through the pandemic, both with the layoffs as well as just the personal trauma, and then us passing that number and continuing to scale. We'll be at 300 by the end of the year, if we can hire. I know hiring is a challenge for everyone right now. So yeah, I had to think about, like, how can our culture actually get stronger as we grow? So not even maintain what we already have, which I think we have a pretty strong and effective culture, but how can we actually leverage the people that we're hiring now to make our culture stronger? And from my perspective, that means not only do we have to understand who we are today and have strong kind of cultural infrastructure that says this is who Redox is today, but also be inclusive enough to take the best out of the new folks coming in and improve upon that structure. And so that's what I'm thinking a lot about as we're hiring more and more people. How can we build an organization that can actually evolve as we get bigger?
I really like that. Like, you're sort of making a conscious effort to scale your company, because that if from this point forward, it is the culture, the process that's going to carry you, as opposed to the personal relationship that you have with the 150 or 200 people that you've worked with, right? That's now all going to become impossible for you and the other founders to do.
Yeah, the way that I started, my role at Redox had always been at the beginning focusing on the market and our customers, and kind of the way I saw it was like being the pace setter out in the market, so running as fast as I can at opportunities, and then my team kind of follows and fills in the gaps and closes the deals and stuff behind me. And what's changed for me recently is that instead of thinking about the market as my customers, I've started to think about my employees as my customers. They are the ones that I'm serving on a day-to-day basis, so that they can serve our customers in a more effective way. And that subtle change has really allowed me to embrace this role of looking internally rather than looking externally, because I know that I'm not going to make that big of an impact if I worked with customers individually, because there's only so much time I have. But if I can make an impact with each of our employees, then that's an exponential impact that can be had in the market, because all of them are working with customers. And if they're doing it in the ways that are aligned with our values at the company, then we're going to be so much more successful in the long run.
So can you share with us, is there something you've worked on in the past 12, 24 months that was directly related to culture that you have implemented or that you have put into place at Redox?
Yeah, for sure. So we've done a few things. I'll highlight some of them. So first and foremost, we refined our values. We used to have 10 of them. And what I did was I said, this is a lot of values. And then a lot of them are kind of saying similar things. And so I kind of, and I feel like this is something that only founders have the privilege to be able to do. Otherwise, it's pretty difficult. Like I rewrote our values, and I think of it as leveling them up. So now we have 3 values, and I think they're so much more useful. But our old values kind of nest under them as example behaviors of it. And the 3 of them are growth mindset, belonging, which I've talked a lot about already, and give a shit, which was actually given to us by one of our customers, because we do these customer interviews where we bring customers in, and the customer was like, the big difference with Redox is that you guys just seem to give a shit. And we're like, doesn't every vendor in the space? And he's like, well, they say that, but like the way that we work and the way that we show up. And I thought that was something that was reflected back at us. But so we have those 3 values. We've essentially created a cultural strategic roadmap where we have goals, and a big goal for 2020 was how can we get everyone at the company to this foundational level of within our culture, and that means certain behaviors that align with each of those values. In order to get the entire company to that foundational layer, we decided that there's going to need to be people within the organization who are what we call the emerging layer, a layer above the foundational layer, which means that they need to, for example, within our cultural container, if you're at the foundational layer, you're participating, you understand that you actually co-create the culture with everybody else. If you're at the emerging layer, your job is to not only understand your impact on the culture, but also protect the culture. When something happens, when something is said, on Slack that people are reacting to, right? Like it is your role to protect the container, to repair it if there's cracks in it, to play an active role. And so we said we need a certain group of people to be operating at that emerging layer. And so we built a curriculum around how do we train people on the skills necessary to do that. And so we've done this with our whole management team. We've gone on 2 retreats focused on this entirely. And we do it with various, we call them cultural ambassadors within the organization. So we call it Camp Redoxy. We bring people into the woods for 3 days, either in Austin, Texas, or in Boulder, Colorado, depending on the time of year. We've done 4 of these already. And what we do is we get super deep on what it means to build a sense of belonging, to build collective flow within your organization, to really live the values and protect them and bring them out in others. And these people start a 6-month program after that to work with each other to bring this back to their teams. And so we've had now 33 people across the organization do that. And so including the management team, that's up to 40 something people out of a team of 200. So it's a good portion of the company that has gone through this immersive training. And we expect them to protect the culture and bring others deeper into it. And that's a program that is ongoing. So we run those 4 times a year. And it's, for people who have attended it, it's been transformational as from what they tell us. But I think the impact that they make within their teams has been really where we've seen the ROI come out, because they understand how to work better with each other. They understand how to bring others within the organization to work cross-functionally and to collaborate more effectively and openly. So those are a couple, of the more creative things that we've done. I think we do a lot of the baseline things that a lot of companies do, but that's kind of the, some of the more creative programming.
Well, I love it. I mean, and 2 things there. I mean, first of all, I love the ambassador program, and I love how you formalized it, right? It's not just like, oh, we're going to name some ambassadors and maybe we'll give them a t-shirt and that's it, right? Like you actually went the next step of actually giving them training and giving them the tools to impact and maintain, as you said, scale up and level up that culture you have there. That's amazing. I also loved how you pointed to something very specific around just Slack, right? And using that, and how if left unattended, how that could be a detriment to your culture, right? If something festers in there, if a complaint is left in there and not addressed, if something bad was said and it shouldn't have been said and no one calls it out, that's stuff that can really replicate and really eat away at a company's culture. And I love how you're pointing to that, going, well, you need ambassadors to get to that and address it, because that's a symptom of an underlying problem. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's huge, whether you're in Zoom and the Zoom chat is going, or in Slack. And essentially it happens probably once a week within our organization where someone says something with the best intention, but it might land the wrong way, or it might make someone feel alienated. And it's often a misalignment between what their intention was and what impact they have. And when that happens, like, how does the organization respond? Because oftentimes it turns into a thread of like people kind of arguing about it and, bringing in articles and things to support whatever point they're trying to make. We actually have protocol around that. We call this, when something like this happens, we call it, it's a container bomb, where some little bomb goes off in our cultural container. How do we respond as an organization to that? And for company-wide ones, our management team responds. And within these ambassadors, they happen on a micro scale. It's on them to figure out how to respond. Because sometimes it's a matter of reaching out to the individuals and just making sure everyone feels like heard and understand that they're not. If someone feels alienated, reach out to them and lend a hand and have some empathy. If it's in a company-wide scale and it turned into a thing where people talked a lot about it, like, it might make sense for a leader within the organization to address it, right? Leaving things unsaid can create resentment within the company. It can create, feelings that build and grow over time. That if you could just address it up front, acknowledge what happened, apologize, potentially talk about what's going to be different in the future. Like, these are all ways that you can, that we try to get ahead of these and not let a culture bomb actually crack our container.
Again, I love that analogy. And I love how you're taking it seriously, right? Because we have heard in some other cultures and other corporations where they kind of, I won't say push it under the rug, but they kind of ignore it to say, well, just deal with it. Like, grow up in the workplace, be professional. And I think that ignores the reality of our world today. Like, that isn't how the world is working. You do have to address it. And those that don't see it as important, they're going to bear the consequences a year from now when those people all of a sudden decide, I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere else. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They do make a difference. And yes, it takes time to deal with it. But when you do, it furthers the growth of your own culture, right? It strengthens it. It doesn't take away your culture, and your company will benefit more from that than if your executive was focused on something externally.
Yeah. And the way that I've really tried to see it, oftentimes it'll be almost like an argument between two sides, whether it's a political thing or some ideology. And my first instinct is like, how can I take sides and be like, this person's right and you're being a jerk? But what I try to kind of level up instead is think, instead of calling someone a winner and making someone feel bad, like, how can we actually build bridges between this argument? So what are ways to build bridges rather than build barriers? Because the more bridges we can build, and having a diverse set of opinions about lots of topics, that's the diversity that we talk about being really valuable within any organization. So I never want to squash someone's ideals about the way that they think about the world. Even if it isn't aligned with how I think about it, there is room within an organization to have a healthy debate about it, to bring issues that people are really passionate about into the organization, and do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the work, but actually builds bridges between people. So we can say, yeah, we might disagree on a certain topic, but I respect you and I can still work with you, and I can still respect your ideas on that topic, as well as topics related to directly to the work that we're doing. So I think sweeping it under the rug, or we saw this kind of at the beginning of the pandemic and the civil unrest that we've had in the past couple of years, where some companies were saying, we only talk about work at work and we do not bring the rest of our lives into it. I think that's pretty sad, because that means you're only going to get people who only bring a portion of themselves into the workplace. And I want people to feel like they can authentically bring as much of themselves as they want, and feel a sense of belonging in doing so.
Awesome. What are some of the things, if you and I get together a year from now to talk about the work you've done on the culture at Redox, what are some of the things we're going to be talking about a year from now?
Hopefully, it's that we were able to hit all of our hiring numbers. We're hiring a bunch. And it's funny, Redox has been a remote company since 2014 when we started it. And so that used to be a big differentiator for us. These days, everyone's remote. And so it is much less of a differentiator. But we really have to lean into the fact that we have a lot of practice and we are remote first. It's not that there's some people in an office and there's some people not. Like, no, everyone is remote. We do it really well. I kind of feel like we're at the cutting edge of figuring out how culture can work effectively at scale in a fully remote setting. There's not many companies who have done that, over 1,000 people or so out there, and everyone is trying to figure that out right now. And the majority of companies probably won't stay fully remote. A lot of them are bringing people back and doing some hybrid model, but figuring out how to make that work is going to be a challenge. And so I hope in a couple of years when we sit down, there'll be a little less unknowns about how to make it work, and a lot more successes about a new way that people are showing up to work every day, where they are fulfilled from an engagement perspective, working effectively, and the unknowns around it from a leadership perspective have been ironed out a little bit.
I love it. I love it. Final question for you, Niko. What one piece of advice would you give to other health IT business leaders out there who are listening and watching? What can they do to improve the culture at their organization?
Oh gosh. I would say, going back to what we talked about earlier, that like the people who work in healthcare are here for a reason, and we need to figure out how to tap into that and really leverage that intrinsic motivation that people come with, because it's really easy for a culture to kill that, for people to focus too much on the short-term wins, to cut corners, things like that. And I think that employees can feel that and they can see that, and as leaders we owe it to them to to not crush the spirits of people who have given up a lot and sacrificed to work in healthcare, because it's not an easy industry. It's easier to bring our talents elsewhere for the amount of effort we put into it. So I would just say that, like, how can we figure out how to embrace the hearts and minds of our employees by helping them, bring their whole selves to work.
Niko, this has been amazing. I love this conversation. You brought up so many amazing quotes that I'm probably going to use in the article to summarize this. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing all this wonderful information.
Yeah, it's been awesome, and it's been great, working with you over the years, and can't wait to sit down again in another couple of years and do this again.
Absolutely. It would be great to do a checkpoint, seriously, in like a year from now, to kind of go, hey, how's this going?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I just want to say, like, that was what intrigued me so much about getting together with you, because you're one of the few health IT leaders that I have talked to where you've put such a focus on culture, and it is amazing to see.
Yep. And I think, it's been because of our culture why Redox has been successful to date. I think with the increased attention that we're paying to it and how we're actively building it, it'll only contribute to our further success. At least that's what I'm hoping for. So yeah, we'll see.
Awesome. Hey, listen, if you loved this interview as much as I did, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you're listening and watching. Also, head on over to healthcareittoday.com to access free resources, industry news, and insightful articles. You can also connect with us on Twitter using the hashtag HITSM. I want to thank my guest again, Niko, for being here. Thank you so much, sir. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. Have a good one.
Thanks to everyone who's listening. Have a great one.